Hello everyone, this is Darion of GNB Productions, and today we will be taking a look at Insomniac's Marvel Spider-Man 2. Marvel Spider-Man 2 released on the Sony PlayStation in October of 2023. The game centers around the two Spider-Men needing to keep their fair city intact, as it is being ravaged by an army of mercenaries and hunters led by their leader, Kraven, who aims to hunt superheroes and villains in an attempt to find an opponent best suited for his final hunt. I have absolutely adored both of the games Insomniac has put out for Spider-Man, and needless to say, this is one of my most anticipated game releases of this year. Gameplay-wise, considering Miles Morales built on top of what was laid down in the first Spider-Man game, I wasn't expecting that many more improvements gameplay-wise. And I am shocked at how wrong I was. To start things off, and this should go without saying, the visuals in this game are a fucking masterpiece. This should come as no surprise, but the folks at Insomniac took full advantage of the PlayStation hardware, and once again gave us one of the best looking games graphically. Something I was on the fence on leading up to the release of this game was the traversal. In the previous two games, the swinging was perfect in my eyes. Incredibly addicting, as even after I'd long beaten the game, I'd still periodically return just to do nothing but swing around. I was a little on the fence, as at first, I didn't think gliding around would be nearly as fun as swinging, but fuck me was I wrong. It's something that on paper I think wouldn't work that well in a Spider-Man game, but in execution, it's pretty damn fun. Dare I say it's just as much fun as swinging around. It's so much fun to just launch yourself off of a point and just soar through the skies. Slight nitpick I have is the wind tunnels you use to gain speed could have been a little less automated. I just wish they required a bit more player input, as you can just go into these and not touch a single button, but that's primarily a me thing. Something that also got a great improvement was the combat. As much as I adored the combat of the first game, a valid criticism that the game received since release is its very simplistic and easy combat encounters when it comes to stuff like the gadget wheel. It feels like the combat got a complete overhaul for the better, as they've nerfed the gadget wheel to about 5 specific gadgets that, while fun, I'm a little mixed on. They traded out cool moves like the web bomb in favor of ones that feel a little less Spider-Man oriented. Out of the 4 new gadgets we have, 2 of them feel right at home in Spider-Man, being the web grabber and ricochet web. Meanwhile, we have ones like Upshot that shoots lasers that launch enemies into the air, and I'm just like, why? Then there's the concussive blast, which isn't new to Spider-Man games, but I wish we had just a few more that worked better with the Spider-Man character. But that is more of a nitpick than anything else really, as they're all still really fun to use. It just feels like the combat was a tad neutered, especially seeing as they removed the suit powers. Yeah, that thing where you would acquire a new suit and it'd grant you a unique and fun ability. Strangely absent in this game. Well, I guess you can't really expect them to come up with original powers for the dozens of new suits they added, but still. Kinda disappointed that wasn't carried over. Something else worth noting about the combat is that each Spider-Man acquires various different abilities the more you progress through the game. At the start of the game, Miles has his Venom powers carried over from his solo game, and they're just as fun. Peter, on the other hand, to compensate, gets these gigantic robotic iron spider arms. Now, I'm a little iffy on these because it's kind of weird to have these things pop out of a fabric suit, but they had to give Peter something, and I guess it had to be this. Either way, they are pretty fun to use, as in combat, these motherfuckers do not hold back at all. These guys must have really took it to heart when people said the combat was too easy in the previous games, as most of the encounters, whether story relevant or random crimes, will be a 50-50 chance of either being a simple encounter or you fighting for your fucking life. Whether it's thugs, hunters, or the fucking symbiotes, this game does not let you off the hook, and I love every second of it. I've said it numerous times on the channel, I'm not necessarily a difficulty kind of guy. I do like a challenge, but I also don't like the game constantly curb-stomping my nuts into the pavement either. With that said, I love how much this game was kicking my ass. I like how they tried to spice things up in terms of enemy variety. Emphasis on try, because throughout the majority of the game, you'll primarily be fighting Kraven's goons, which is something I'll get into when going over the story, but it's nice to see that you can't easily plow your way through an encounter. One of the added features that attributes to that is the tweaked focus meter. In the first game, you could kinda just heal no matter how much focus you had. In this game, they spice things up by requiring you to have a fully charged focus meter. So you'll have to make a gamble on whether or not you'll use it as a finisher and have reduced damage, or use it to heal, but you won't have a finisher for a while in mid-combat, and I thought that was pretty damn cool. The parry in this game was a fucking lifesaver. Not to get too off track, but I gotta come clean here. After playing Sonic Frontiers for over a year now and coming into this game, it feels so fucking good to play a game that actually has a parry that requires precision and timing. Anyway, back on the spider's abilities. The more you progress through the story, they get more abilities. Miles gets some new Venom powers, which never get properly explained, but I'll get into that later. And they're fine. They aren't bad, but not nearly as cool or even as effective as his traditional Venom powers. And for Peter, he later on acquires the Venom symbiote, which, should come as no surprise, they turn out to be far more fun than his robotic arms. I like how with each of these powers, they aren't easy to abuse, so it'll take a lot more input on when you think a move should be best effective to execute. The combat in this game somehow is a far improvement from the system we had before. I truly can't get enough of it. A pretty big returning element that caught me off guard were the return of the MJ missions. The side missions that served no purpose other than to pad out the game's runtime and were almost universally panned have now made a return. Look, it's no secret that the MJ missions were some of the weaker elements of the first game. They weren't even bad design-wise, I'd say, but when you're playing a Spider-Man in as good of a game as this, and you force me into these segments where I'm not being Spider-Man, it really drags a lot of the shit down. In Miles Morales, these stages were completely omitted, and I'd almost say it's superior to the first game for the sole fact it removed all that useless padding. And yet, even with all that backlash from the first game, they brought it back. But this time it kinda surprised me. Now, it's still annoying to be dragged out of the Spidey experience, but it's crazy to find out that they made MJ not ass in this game. By giving her a gun and the ability to run and take down enemies, it made the once slow and monotonous missions far more tolerable and actually quite fun. Something I feel needs to be brought up as well is the extended map. Now, it isn't a gigantic deal or anything major that changes up the game, but it's kind of neat being able to go and explore more of New York. I love how the side missions in this game are more than just generic side missions. They're almost like full-on side stories adjacent to the main one, which I found to be pretty cool. You can catch up with Yuri Watanabe, now going by Wraith, as you work together to take down this firebranding cult led by Cletus fucking Cassidy. You get to do these challenges for a rehabilitated Mysterio that result in you going into a giant battle with an illusion of him, carrying on the Spider-Man game tradition of fighting giant Mysterios, and even smaller ones where you're helping out the local homeless guy find home for his pet pigeons before he passes. Rest in peace, Howard. Or helping this girl find her grandpa as he reminisces on the memories of his deceased wife. Those last two in particular, I just couldn't help but love, as they're just ones that really get you in the feels. A damn side mission in a Spider-Man game should not have gotten me that damn emotional. The set pieces in this game vastly trump the ones that came before. Insomniac is no stranger to batshit insane set pieces, and their Spider-Man games are no different. Whether it's the fight with Fisk in the first game or the Rhino chase in Miles Morales, they don't hold a damn thing back with their opening battles. The opening fight with Sandman is fucking insanity. Insomniac really put all this shit together to really just flex how much they could do with the PS5. You just seamlessly swing from Peter and Miles' school right into the midst of this, and the chaos just doesn't let up. There are a lot of really cool ones too. Notably the one with Miles chasing Black Cat, who acquires a Doctor Strange portal wand that sends you to various locations like Antarctica, which was really fucking cool. You knew with the symbiote being a key part of the story, they absolutely had to give us a fight with Peter and Miles, and it's as glorious as you could ever imagine. But the thing that had my stupid ass kicking and screaming is when these motherfuckers allowed us to play as fucking Venom. I lost my fucking shit as you're just mowing down these innocent Oscorp employees, and it's honestly one of the best experiences I've had with a game in a while. My only complaint is that they didn't give me more. I'm expecting that Venom solo game to be a top priority. I am not joking. Something that really disappoints me, however, is we never get the opportunity to fight Venom as Peter and Miles at the same time, like the marketing would lead you to believe. Not a huge deal, but still somewhat disappointing. I'm also a little disappointed at the severe lack of post story content compared to the first game. You could spend what felt like days collecting certain things and doing miscellaneous shit in the first game. With this stuff here, you can clear it all in about a day, which isn't bad, just kinda disappointing. Especially considering that at the time of me making this video, you still can't replay missions and there isn't even a new game plus. A lot of the additional content includes wiping out these symbiote nests, which will stress you the fuck out, finding Sandman's scattered mind crystals. I promise it makes more sense when playing the actual game. Finding these random spider bots, which leads to an okay-ish cutscene. Taking pictures of random New York shit while Robbie Robinson spews a bunch of New York propaganda bullshit at you. Do some shit for Prowler, take out Kraven's hunters, and that's largely it. There aren't any unique trinkets or items you can collect like the backpacks in the first game, which, makes sense. But to me, it kind of left me feeling a little melancholic when I ran out of shit to do. Now for the story. I feel like I'm one of the only few who think the story for Marvel's Spider-Man 2 is not that good. I mentioned this to a friend of mine, but I just think it's crazy that with each of these Insomniac Spider-Man games, with each passing game, the stories get slightly worse. A lot of my problems hinges on the writing and overall usage of some of its characters. I don't know what it is this time around, but Insomniac Peter is just nowhere near as interesting as he was before. His story and overall struggle throughout the game could have been handled a bit better, as with him coming in contact with the symbiote, and he goes through his little edgy phase, it doesn't really feel all that natural. Like, a lot of the conflict feels a little too artificial for me. And poor Miles. When going into this game, I was interested in seeing what exactly Miles would be dealing with in comparison to Peter and the symbiote. They don't have Miles do a single interesting thing in this entire game. His entire story revolves around trying to find and stop an escaped Martin Lee. Now, the resolution to that plot is cool and interesting with them making amends, but everything beforehand just feels completely non-existent. I've always been a little iffy on Insomniac Miles in general. He's not a bad version of Miles, he's just kinda, sorta okay. But they did this man so dirty in this game, as he just has literally nothing to do. And then they had the gall to tease that we'd be getting a third Spider in this universe. You barely had a story where you could make 2 work. Don't you dare try to add 3. Peter and Miles both kind of suffer from the same problem, in that the conflict they both have to deal with doesn't feel properly fleshed out. Peter says multiple times that the symbiote, quote, makes him a better Spider-Man, but there's almost no point in the game before he gets the symbiote where he feels like an inferior Spider-Man. It just kind of comes out of nowhere. And for Miles in the various dream sequences we go through with him, he expresses the fear of his family and friends leaving him, even though nowhere in the game is that properly alluded to. That boss fight between them gameplay-wise is some of the coolest shit you'll do in this game, but narrative-wise, it just doesn't really feel all that earned. This next thing is something that since this game has been released has kind of been the talk of the town when it comes to Spider-Man fans, and I just gotta get this off of my chest. It genuinely pains me how unfunny these Spider-Men are. This wasn't a big problem in the first game, as while a lot of the lines and quips are corny, there are also a few decent lines and jokes to help balance them out. I can count on one hand how many jokes and quips made me laugh in this game. I feel like a lot of people, and this includes Spider-Man writers apparently, forget that Spider-Man is actually supposed to be funny. Now, not every joke can or even is supposed to land, and I can deal with a few corny jokes here and there, but when a majority of the quote-unquote jokes derive from the Spider-Man making intentionally corny jokes, that just screams laziness when it comes to writing humor in my eyes, especially for Spider-Man. A lot of the mid-fight banter aren't even jokes or quips some of the time. Sometimes these motherfuckers are just saying slightly witty things, and it pisses me off. The writing in general for everyone involved just feels so dull. This is a problem that mainly occurred to me in Miles Morales, but it's so much more prevalent here. as the dialogue for almost every character feels like diet Disney Channel movie schlock some of the time. The way this game utilizes Kraven and Venom also kind of pisses me off. For Kraven, he has this army of mercenaries. Now, this isn't really something that Kraven is known for. If anything, this would be something the character would kind of be against. An army of soldiers that unquestioningly do his bidding. But it's a video game, and I almost let this slide. Keyword being almost, because when you realize that for a guy who lives for the hunt, he doesn't really do that much hunting throughout the game. He literally just sits on his ass for a majority of the game and lets his henchmen do all the work.
My hunters, you have been stalked by that woman this whole night because you tracked the spider.
Alright, you lazy bitch, come down here and do something about it! Not only is this inconsistent with who Kraven traditionally is, it also doesn't feel all that consistent with the Kraven we've known throughout this game. It's a shame because this is honestly one of the coolest Kravens we've ever gotten. He has a real commanding and foreboding presence. The dude pulls up to New York and slaughters a good portion of Spider-Man's rogues gallery, but then proceeds to sit on his ass for half the game. I guess you can say he's saving his strength for those he deems worthy of a fight with him, but I don't know, man. I think this character would have been significantly cooler had he been in it more. Venom and the entire symbiote storyline really disappointed me. I briefly mentioned a bit ago how a lot of the conflict surrounding it feels artificial. I mainly say that because they kind of just use the symbiote as this evil goo with little to no nuance. I'm not going to act like I'm some Venom purist. I haven't read up that much on the character, but I still know for a fact that in 2023, we can do so much better than just basic bitch mustache twirling villain. I really hate how as soon as Peter gets the suit, and I fucking mean it, like 2 minutes after he gets the damn thing, he becomes so overtly aggressive, it's hilarious. It doesn't even make that much damn sense, because Harry had this thing presumably for a long ass time, and he was fine. Peter gets it for like 2 seconds, and he's automatically evil. I would have preferred it to be a scenario where Peter is having a rough time mentally, and rather than the symbiote turn him evil for the sake of it, have it amplify his negative thoughts and traits as opposed to just making him evil, seemingly for no reason. A lot of the conflict that gets addressed for Peter is in this Martin Lee dreamscape vision, and I can't help but be frustrated that none of the stuff they draw attention to within it are reflected within the rest of the story. Peter dealing with May's death, his inadequacies of being Spider-Man really could have worked to give Insomniac Peter some much-needed depth. The Osborns I thought were kinda interesting. I really dig this take on Norman for being one of the more sympathetic ones. Throughout the series, he's just trying his best to save his son, and it constantly backfires and blows up in his face. Harry being Venom is something I'm not typically a fan of, mainly because whenever it's done, it kind of feels like it's done for the sake of giving Peter a more emotional connection in the Peter and Venom dynamic. Even though I think the traditional story with Eddie Brock can work given a few tweaks. This time, though, it mainly frustrates me because it means we have to go 3 games in a row where the main villain is someone our heroes love and care for, and I'm just kinda getting tired of that happening. Here's hoping for Norman in the next game. It genuinely pains me at how much Venom literally has no character. Now, I'm not saying I needed goofball Venom, but even by evil Venom standards, this dude's boring as hell. By the time the whole symbiote invasion started to kick off, this is when the game's story was starting to lose me. Because this is when Venom became just a generic bad guy, and the symbiote invasion thing did not take as much precedent as I hoped it would. You never really get to fully live in and feel the weight of this alien invasion, like you did when the Sinister Six were running loose in the first game. The only major thing that comes out of it is a boss fight with Scream, who is MJ for some reason. I'm not going to act like I'm a Scream purist, but I just kind of thought that was a weird choice. On paper, a lot of the story elements are interesting, but it's kind of bogged down by a lot of weak character writing and overall usage. It has a lot of cool moments like Miles and Lee working things out, and Peter becoming anti-Venom was cool as shit. But the ending didn't feel as satisfying as the writers hoped it would. Peter taking a temporary leave of absence from Spider-Man and letting Miles fly solo for a while is a neat idea, but it didn't feel as earned as it could have been. The voice cast in this game is fucking incredible. Everyone is doing an exceptional job. The main standouts for me being Yuri Lowenthal as Peter and Tony Todd as Venom. Lowenthal was acting his fucking ass off in this game. Every rage-fueled and heartbreaking moment was perfectly elevated by his performance. And Tony fucking Todd as Venom. There's nothing I can really say to emphasize how perfect he is, so I'm gonna just play a few clips for you.
I'm not seeing a rock. No? Hold on, I'm nearly to you.
Thanks for coming, Pete. We're going to heal everyone. Look at us! We are healthy, strong. This is what you wanted, isn't it? This is where we became best friends.
Yeah, it is.
And now it's where we become brothers.
On, Harry. We are.
My only complaint is that he wasn't in it more. I am not kidding, Insomniac. Fuck Spider-Man 3. I need my Venom game today. I don't care if the symbiote got destroyed by the end of the story. The story in this game wasn't that good anyway, so who gives a fuck if it gets retconned? Overall, I'd say Insomniac Spider-Man 2 is a good-ass game. With outstanding visuals, really addicting gameplay, the combat is somehow a far improvement from the previous installments on top of the greatly improved traversal. The side content, while not as plentiful as I'd hoped, were really fun and for a lack of a better term, really made you feel like Spider-Man. The story could have used a bit more work, as while the overall narrative is interesting, the characters we follow along the journey unfortunately are not. The writing and character dialogue is a bit too hammy and corny in a few places for me, and certain story beats didn't feel fully fleshed out or even developed. Regardless, I still think Marvel's Spider-Man 2 is an amazing experience. So, with all that said, if you agree or disagree with anything I've said in this video, let me know right down there in the comments below. Also, be sure to like and subscribe. This is Darion of GNB Productions, and take care.